is that I really can, with a little scrubber, I can get back to white paper even with a stained color. People think I can't, but it takes a little bit of work, but not much. And I really like the toning of paper. And so very rarely is there white in any of my paintings. There's very soft tones of red or blue or green, and you read them as white. And I think they're richer because they have that tonality to them.
So I'm super stoked, you guys, about this interview because it actually takes us here to the San Diego Watercolor Society, which person we are interviewing was a past president, not of just the San Diego Watercolor Society, but also the National Watercolor Society. And here we are, Linda Dahl. So without any further ado, let's go to this interview, and you're gonna learn so much about things that we haven't even talked about in this wonderful interview. So enjoy this interview. Alright, I'm super excited to have my guest on today for this YouTube podcast. We have one of my faves, which is Linda Dahl, who is a Daniel Smith brand ambassador for quite some time. Even in my youth, I got to just experience Linda and just her wealth of knowledge. She's an amazing character. Linda, just tell us a little bit about you and how you got into watercolor.
We moved out here in 1972. I was an oil painter before then. And I was very fortunate to meet Rex Brandt and Millard Sheets and George Gibson and George Post and Milford Zorns and the whole California school. And I was fortunate enough to take classes with them. And I realized that I never wanted to paint another oil again, that watercolor was who I am and what I always wanted to do. I'm from the East Coast, and I kind of combine the West Coast watercolor, loose-goosey, with the New York tight oil renderings. So my style is completely different than anyone else's because my experiences were different. And when I was painting in oil, I painted in a grisaille method, which is where you do everything in shades of gray and then you glaze on top with color. And I didn't see any reason why I couldn't do that with watercolor if I use stained colors. Probably one of the few artists that every color on her palette or on my palette is a stained color. I love the look of all the opaques and the transparents, but give me the stained colors any day of the week and I'm happy. For many years, I painted with three colors. I painted with one red, one yellow, and one blue that was stained. And I did big 30 by 40 paintings with three colors, and nobody ever knew I only had three colors. I loved mixing my own greens. I loved mixing my own oranges and purples and grays. And so when I travel, sometimes I just take red, yellow, and blue with me, and I truly know how to mix every color there is. One of the exercises when I was teaching, the first day we would do a color exercise, and students had to mix at least 100 oranges, purples, and greens in an abstract painting. And they all said to me, "Oh my God, I can make any color that Daniel Smith makes or Winsor Newton makes." And I said, yes. And so I have added a few other colors just because of laziness more than anything. But when you do use three, red, yellow, and blue, the colors all are part of the same family, and they really do go together beautifully. So for those people just starting out, start with a red, yellow, and blue. Learn to mix your colors and learn what the colors do is my advice to anybody.
We actually haven't talked about stained colors yet. Can you just explain a little bit what's the difference between a staining color and maybe a transparent or semi-transparent color?
John would be better at this, but I believe that the ones made from the earth are very lifting, and the ones made from synthetic dyes are the staining colors. And what I love is that I really can, with a little scrubber, I can get back to white paper even with a stained color. People think I can't, but it takes a little bit of work, but not much. And I really like the toning of paper. And so very rarely is there white in any of my paintings. There's very soft tones of red or blue or green, and you read them as white. And I think they're richer because they have that tonality to them.
I agree. I really do. I would just be curious because some people have asked this question is, what do you find most rewarding about watercolor?
I am a neatnik. I am a type A personality, and watercolor is so clean, so easy to clean up, so easy to travel with. Acrylics dry too fast. The watercolor, I mean, I put paintings back in the tub and wash them down again. I just think of all the media that I've ever tried, and I've tried a lot. Watercolor is my first love.
That's so wonderful. You know, when I was schlepping paintings and I was over the permanent collection at the San Diego Watercolor Society, they have a couple of your paintings. And one of the ladies said to me, she's like, I love how she saves the whites. And I looked at your painting and I was like, I don't see any white on here. And then during the pandemic, you actually did a video interview telling about how you actually stain a whole bunch of just papers. Yep. And you set those off to the side. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a couple of people inside of me. I think there's a couple of people inside everybody. And one is the child that likes to play, and one is the draftsman that likes to draw, and the other likes to play with color. And so there's three definite people that paint my paintings, if that makes any sense. And so sometimes I just take papers, maybe 12 papers, and just do a wash on all of them. And I sent you a magazine article that shows the wash, the drawing on top of the wash, and then the grisaille started to add to that, and then the finished product. And it's just a simple, no, I shouldn't say simple. For me, it's a very comfortable way to work.
I love that. And can you expound just a little bit on what your process is? Do you go out and do some sketching, or do you go and take some photos of a beautiful captured moment of people? And what is the subject matter that you tend to paint?
I love to paint people. I have for many years, but I also do other things, and I don't always put them on the beach. So some of the photos that I sent you are when I had a house in Montana, and I did so many skis. Instead of the people against the sunlight, I put skis against the sunlight. I sent you one where we were in Taos, and I was sitting in the back of a car, and this couple was watching Rex Brand. It was his birthday, and we all went out there for a birthday workshop, and they were standing watching him for a full hour. So I did a drawing on a sheet of paper that already had a wash on it, went back to the hotel and finished it, house in the background. So I do love the beach, and I live in San Diego, and I love to go sit at the beach or down to Mission Bay or anywhere. Sometimes, matter of fact, we were talking the other day about a sketchbook I had, and there was a page that just had backgrounds, just backgrounds that I might want to put in a painting with figures. And then you've seen me out on location. I'll go out and sketch buildings. They may end up small and in the back bigger than life. And the buildings are so big and people are so small. And I like the opposite. So I like to make the people big and then reduce it, life or buildings or the world to be smaller. And so, yeah, I'll work from sketches. I will work from photos, but I have to take the photo myself, and I have to really watch what the people are doing. Most of the time, I like the figures on one foot. I don't like them even, so the legs are perfect. I don't like the two arms equal. I like them doing something that makes one shoulder higher than the other. I look at the negative space around the figures and try to figure out what would make a good abstract design. And so, yeah, I work from a lot of different materials. Sometimes I sketch on my iPad, but most of the time I just like to sketch in a regular sketchbook. I love to do black and white things and then just put a little color. They're not meant to be art pieces. They're just meant for me to remember what I saw and what I might want to paint.
Just a little picture shot. Like one of the paintings I love of yours is there's these two people, they have their back to us and they are having this casual conversation holding their tennis rackets, and they're in their tennis outfits with the shorts, and they're just having this beautiful conversation. In the color and the way you stained the background in such a warm day, I kind of get like an atmosphere of like what time of the day it is. And there's one question that people ask is, why doesn't Linda Doll paint the faces of people?
I think that the magazines and the newspapers and the ads play way too much attention on the face. I think that the body language is, for me, so much more important. If I look a block away and I see my son, I know it's my son from his body language. I don't have to see his face. And I just have never been interested in the face. I'm interested in the soul and the heart of the person. And I'm interested in the nonverbal communication that is depicted with the body language. You can tell if somebody's enjoying someone's company, tell if they're annoyed with the person. You can tell if they're in love with the person. You can tell so much about the body language that I just have not ever been interested in doing portraits of the face. And I love backlit. I think that in another lifetime, I must have been an illustrator, and I really don't want to do illustrations. And I found that if I did front lit, they became illustrations. But if I did side lit or backside lit, they had much more of a feeling and much more. I don't care about the blue sky. I'll put a green sky. I'll put a red sky, whatever mood the child in me wants to play with, or whatever I've put down on the sheet of paper, that makes the sky. And I can remember years ago, Frank Webb saying, no, maybe it was Robert Wood, I don't know who it was. If value's correct, color doesn't matter. You can put any color you want anywhere as long as you have the values correct. And so I'm a value painter, there's no question. I love color. Values do my abstract painting and do my abstract design and pull everything together.
How important is it to know the principles of art, like meaning like composition and pattern and rhythm, those kind of things?
I think it's very important. And then I think at some point you start to break a lot of those rules. But if you don't know them and you don't know why they work, then you don't know how to break them. And so I break many, many rules. I break aerial perspective. I break linear perspective. I break scale. I break a lot of rules, and that's what makes them my style. But I know why I'm doing it. As I said earlier, I want the figure larger than life. I want figures to be important. People are very important in my life, and I want them to be important. Aerial perspective says that if something is closer to you, it would be brighter and darker. Well, that's true if you're looking at what's close. But if you look across the room and look at something far, the rest becomes peripheral vision. And so I understand why they say the rule works, but I also understand the opposite works. If I want the viewer to go past the figure and become a bird and fly into my painting, then I need to make a dark way out far away and a hard edge way out on the distance so that I know I break the rule, but I know it does what I want to do to make my painting successful.
That's so true. I agree with you 100%. And some beginning students and intermediate students don't understand the value of supplies. Could you tell us why it'd be important to have good paint?
To be a lot of sewing, and we'd use bad material. It makes it twice as hard. I happen to use Arches paper or Fabriano paper. Those are the two I prefer. And the reason I prefer them is because they're the most forgiving. I can make adjustments. I never say mistakes, but I can make adjustments constantly. I can lift paint, even stain colors. I can lift. I can go over them several times. Some of my paintings have 15 layers. You'd know it to look at it, but sometimes I'm not sure what color I want. I know what value I want, so I will keep putting color on until I get to the value I want. And I may start with reds and then totally take all the red off and then put blue, say, no, I really wish that was blue, and change it to blue. You can't do that with bad paper. The better the paper, the more forgiving it is, the more adjustments you can make. And I'm not perfect. I need to make lots of adjustments in my painting. I make decisions as I go along. And sometimes I change my mind. And that good paper is really good. The same with pigments. Now, I happen to prefer the Daniel Smith pigments, and I understand why other people use others. But one of the things Daniel Smith pigment does for me, I put my pigments out and I let them dry totally, completely. It makes it, I mean, I traveled for years. I mean, I taught for 50 years and I traveled all over the world. I would put it out a week ahead. I would let them dry completely. I don't even have to spray my palette. I just take my brush, wet it, put it on the pigment, and I get rich color. And they don't shrink. So many of the other pigments shrink, but a lot of the other pigments are better for people who work wet into wet. They might disperse differently, but for me, what the Daniel Smith color does when I dry it and then use it, it's everything I need. You'll see in some of the demos, there's 3 or 4 demos on YouTube of me painting. And yeah, it's just, I don't even spray it. Like I said, it comes back beautifully.
That's so good. And what is your suggestions about brushes?
I love the Escoda brushes. A couple of years ago, many years ago, I visited the Escoda factory and met the family and saw the process, and it was just wonderful. But they keep a point. They actually do a process that's almost like giving the brush a permanent, and it keeps its point for many, many years. I have some Escoda brushes that might be 10 years old that still have a beautiful point on them, and they hold a lot of pigment and water. They're just, for me, I like to control what I'm doing, and I have total control with my Escoda brushes, and I like the Versatile series. I can remember when I thought if I owned a sable brush, I'd be a good painter, because all good painters owned a sable brush. I would much rather use a synthetic and use a Versatile any day of the week. I don't like floppy brushes.
Is a synthetic, but it acts like a sable.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so good. I like those. I like those too. I agree. What are some tips for people to kind of get their mileage in to develop their art?
Paint, paint, paint. The only way you're going to learn to paint is by painting. You can watch a billion videos, you can read a billion books, and you will never learn to paint. The only way you learn to paint with the brush in your hand and make some mistakes and throw out some paper. It takes acres of paper to become a painter. And your first, I would say 200 paintings, you're still a beginner. There's just so much to learn with watercolor, and the only way you're going to learn that is by doing it. and maybe start quarter sheets. So, I mean, you don't have to make the mistake on a big full sheet of paper. Do 200 quarter sheets before you start to, I can remember somebody saying as they walk by a painter, if you don't have something to say, don't shout. Well, beginner painters start and they do these great big full sheet paintings and they don't even know what they're talking about. I believe every painting has a message. It might just be, isn't red beautiful? It might just be, I love texture or pattern. But you have to find out who you are and what your story is and what message are you giving. For me, it's if I can give people one moment of peace in the day, if they can look at my painting and just stand there for 1 second and take a deep breath, my painting is successful. So you need to know what your message is. I remember Joan Irving years ago saying that she loved the wind and the breeze. If there wasn't a wind or a breeze in her painting, it wasn't her painting. And for me, it's sunlight and it's relaxation. I want people to relax when they look at my painting.
That's wonderful. Does it matter whether your painting is vertical or horizontal format?
No. I've done quite a bit of both, probably more verticals, but every once in a while, I just, whatever the scene is or whatever the motion is, the horizontals are a little quieter. And a lot of the beach chairs were all horizontals. I used to go down and do all kinds of beach chairs at the beach. And those almost all were horizontal. Sometimes fishermen at a pier, if there's going to be more than one, I'll do the horizontal because it's important to get that quiet that comes from the horizontal. But others, when I want the dignity of the person, I'll do vertical. A vertical will always have a little more dignity and a horizontal will always have a little more restful feel. So again, it depends on the story I'm telling that day.
If somebody was new to art and they're looking at your art and they like what they're seeing and they would want to research maybe that style of art, what kind of art would you say your painting is?
You know, I don't know. I don't follow any style. It's kind of halfway between the California school with the beautiful color and the New York school with the structured drawing. I'm bi-coastal. I'm a little bit of both of my experiences. And I truly don't know anybody else that quite paints like me. And I didn't do that to be different. I just did it because it was what I like to do.
That's wonderful.
Years ago, I had a lot of my students go through magazines and calendars and shows, and they had to find a painting that they truly wished they had done and wanted to show to a kindergarten teacher, an art critic, and a museum director and say, this is my very best work I've ever done. And it sounds like it's so easy to do that, but people had a really hard time finding something. And when I did it, I found that almost everything was a serigraph. They weren't watercolors, they weren't oil paintings. And I realized that the serigraph feeling, although I didn't want to do printmaking, and I have a degree in painting and printmaking, but I didn't want to do the prints. I wanted to paint I wanted to paint my serigraphs with watercolor. And so there's very flat washes in my pieces. And I think that's the influence of the serigraph.
That's wonderful. My first year of college, I did mono printing, and I loved printing. And there was even a challenge we had this big, huge piece of paper, and I actually had to have put it between some plywood and drive over it with the truck the mono print was so large, but I actually enjoyed the ghost print more than anything.
Yeah.
And it was quite fun to see the luminous quality which your paintings have. Your paintings have this glow. And how is it that
Hopefully.
you're able to achieve that glow?
If I don't get that, I don't want the painting. Yeah, that's part of who I am. I love the glow of watercolor, and no other media quite does the same glow that watercolor does.
I agree. I agree. Can we talk a little bit about community? Because I'm on the board of National Watercolor Society, but you have been a president not just once but twice. What is the benefit of being involved in community? And I feel there's a really loving and welcoming community in watercolor. Can you add on to something about that?
Yeah, I think working for art organizations teaches you far more than you ever give. I've been on the board of AWS. I've been on the board of Watercolor West. I've been president of San Diego. I've been president of NWS twice, and every single time I think my paintings grew. Just being around like-minded artists and hearing them talk and hearing them discuss why they paint and their motivations. I mean, it really taught me so much. For the Watercolor Society, way back, we're talking, oh, I can't even remember what year it was. It was a year after I was president. Georgiana and Leip and I started the workshop program. And she did it the first year, and then I did it the next 3 years. And I had 10 people come. Well, first of all, I applied to do my master's at San Diego State in watercolor, and they turned me down. They said that I could do it in pencil, in crayon, in printmaking, in acrylic, or in oil, but watercolor was a housewife's medium. And I said, ha, ha, ha. Anyway, I brought 30 people out in the 3 years. And when I learned the most, honestly, was taking them out to dinner or sitting with them at lunch and being able to get into their mind and ask them questions, just like you're doing to me today. I found conversations with other artists to be so stimulating. It's just so, I have a group I go out and sketch with on Mondays, called the Sassy Sketches. And just hearing them and just seeing them do something. The other day, somebody had something and I went, whoa, all the years I've been painting, I never saw that. What is that? So just being around people. And first, we wouldn't have our organizations if we didn't have volunteers. But honest to goodness, you will get far more back than you ever give if you volunteer for art organizations.
That's so good. That's so good. I think I've accelerated and so much faster getting to see all the different facets that happen in a society, watercolor community than I ever learned at art school. In art school,
No
we
question.
were just, painting, painting, painting. Now, there's probably some people, if they've watched this far and listened to us talk so long, there's probably someone that's watching this that, they're starting late in life. And for them to now go to college, that's really probably not a thing for them. Do you think someone can learn watercolor?
I think the workshop San Diego Watercolor Society has is fabulous. They have one almost every month, not every, I think they skip a month or two. But if anybody wants to learn any style of painting or just about watercolor, I think taking the workshops is probably your best bet. I think reading art history books and reading the life of artists is also very good to see. I mean, you read some of George O'Keeffe or you read some of Mary Cassatt and you hear all the problems, you hear the problems she had taking care of her parents. And you realize you're not alone, that everybody has a life, especially women artists. Women don't have the luxury of not being a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother. I I mean, I now have 8 great grandchildren. So I love my kids and I love my grandkids and my great grandkids, but I'm still a painter and I'm a serious painter. I'm sort of retiring a little bit, but I don't think you ever retire as an artist. You just keep going.
That's wonderful. And if there's someone that maybe has a tragic season in their life and they haven't had a chance to paint, what would you say to that person? And they're now wanting to get back to painting.
Go to the San Diego Watercolor Society workshops. Look at the whole year's worth. Look at the artists that they have coming and see which one you think you relate to most. Are you an abstract painter? Are you a representational painter? What kind of painting would you like to do? And then I'd start with somebody who's closer to you rather than completely the opposite direction. Abstract painting is so much fun. I'm doing a lot of abstract collage now and really enjoying it. But I know that if I were starting out, my drawing skill let me tell a little story. And then years ago, Rex Brandt gave a lecture on start with your strength, not your weakness. If you start with your strength, you'll always be 2 steps ahead. If you start with your weakness, you'll always be running to catch up. So after the lecture, I went up to him and I said, if what you just said and the whole lecture you just said is true, why do you tell me not to draw so much when drawing is my strength? And he thought about it for a minute and he said, I guess because it's not my strength. And that was the day I decided that my figures could be drawn as realistically as I wanted and still were a watercolor. People will ask me, don't you think your paintings are illustrations? And I say to them, you can call it an illustration if you want. I call it a painting. To me, they are watercolor paintings. And yes, I do a lot of drawing. I love to draw. My favorite thing in the whole wide world, after my husband died, I did tons of sketchbooks, just sitting there sketching. While my cancer was in process, which I'm now fine and totally cancer-free, but I did a lot of drawing and a lot of sketching. I mean, put a pen in my hand and I'm happy. Nothing else matters. During COVID, I sat and sketched every day. I love to draw. I like to paint too. Painting is hard work. Sketching is meditation for me.
That's so good, and I can totally agree with that. And in my early years as a child, I would spend lots of time drawing, and I'd have to maybe even sit and wait for my mom to pick me up. Being with a single mother that had worked 3 jobs, there was lots of waiting time, and so I did lots of sketching as a kid, and so I could see how that's relaxing. Now, with a person with your experience, I think this question is so good. It's I want to make sure I get the right one. How has art history changed since you started painting?
How has my painting changed?
No, how has the industry of watercolor changed?
Oh, totally different. I was very fortunate. I was at a time when everything I brought to Knowles Gallery in La Jolla sold. Every full sheet, every half sheet. I did commissions. I mean, I made a really good income selling watercolors. People all over the world would come into Knowles, see them, and then hire me to do their family, or I would just do people in general or chairs. I think the print industry has taken its toll. I also think that the new generation doesn't really appreciate, or maybe I'm being sarcastic, but I don't think they appreciate fine art. They're such an instant generation that they I don't know. I see the whole market has really dried up quite a bit. I know there's still people getting really good money for paintings, But my personal, I mean, like I said, I used to sell every month 2 or 3 paintings. I mean, there was never a month went by when I didn't sell. But let me back up and say, I am shocked and delighted with the results that the San Diego Watercolor Society is having at the gallery, and how many paintings, original paintings, they are selling down there. And so I'm very pleased that the artists of San Diego have a venue to show and to sell. That's very, very nice that we are so fortunate to have that.
Is a gallery the only way, and commissions the only way to make money as an artist?
Well, teaching is what a lot of people will do too. But I think teaching can also destroy your creativity. You tend to start to do things that are safe. You tend to, especially when you're doing a public demo for 200 people, you tend not to want to go out on a limb, where in your own home studio, you're willing to take a lot more chances. So I think you have to be careful when you start to teach, that you don't become a process painter, where everything is the same and the students expect one thing and you give it to them every single time. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to say, you know what? This is what happens once in a while. This painting just didn't work. I'm going to just gesso over it and do an acrylic on top. This is not happening. And it doesn't happen a lot, but I don't care how many years you've been painting, it happens. And sometimes you just aren't happy with the result. And I either paint over it or I tear it up. I will not put my name on a piece that I'm not pleased with. And let me just go, a lot of people ask me this all the time: how do I know when a painting is finished? And for me, what I do is I open my computer, I take a picture of what I'm working on, and I put up 5 or 6 of the paintings that I like best. And I put it in the middle, and then I put the other paintings around it. And if it stands up to them, then I know it's finished. If I look at it and go, wow, it's not soup yet. We used to have mugs, is it soup yet? And a studio partner and I would put it out, is it soup yet? And I can tell when I put it next to my finished paintings if it needs a little more value, if it needs a little more color, if it needs a little more oomph, if I need to unpaint. Robert E. Wood used to say, every day that I paint a painting, the next day I should come and unpaint one thing, because I always do one too many. But seeing it on my computer screen and seeing it next to paintings helps me know when my pieces are done.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with my mother being a ceramic artist, and it was green and it needed to be fired and put into the kiln or glazed, right? And it wasn't ready to be displayed in a gallery space until it was put into a kiln.
Right.
I never see a green clay sculpture, in a museum or gallery for sale. And so it's that same process, like working and adding and subtracting. And I don't think that comes overnight. You have to be a well-seasoned painter. So what inspires you when it comes to painting? And I remember too, there was like this season too that you actually would take a camera and you were taking photos for a while, these really nice close-up photos. So I think you have an eye for looking for inspiration. So how do you find those moments?
I see them. Rex used to talk about people who were creative and people were appreciators, and that there were 2 different types of personalities, and that you had to decide which you were. And a creative person sits down with a white piece of paper and just starts to go. And most of the time, that is not me. With my collages, it is me. But with everything else, I walk around and all of a sudden I see the lighting, I see the design, I see the pattern of light. I mean, I'd have to look at the corner of my room. I could look at that corner and come up with a whole painting because there's some wonderful shapes and light and value happening there. I can't make that up as well as I can appreciate it when I see it. So yeah, I'm an appreciator. And even, I don't know if you can see my photographs on the back wall. Those are close-ups of roses from down at the Balboa Park that I take with my iPhone and then print large and frame and have in a gallery. And they're, I mean, it's the design. So I remember during a show with Frank Webb, and he looked at a painting and he said to me, you know what that painting says to me? It says, give them the award. And he said, anytime, he's the only rule, and this is my philosophy too, the only rule you can't break in all of art history is running the viewer's eye out of the painting. And if the viewer eye runs out of the painting, choom, you're gone. That rule I will not break. And so I do a lot of squinting. That's why I have these lines here. I squint a lot. And I make sure that I keep the viewer's eye in the painting, whether it's a Z, whether it's an S, whether it's a Q, whether it's a P. I often think of it as letters of the alphabet. And how can that letter, so like a G is a wonderful letter. A C isn't so good. You know, an S is a good letter, but so an M is a terrible letter. A W is a good letter because it'll bring you up and the viewer will read it again. The M, you go up, down, up, and right out the bottom. So when I had brand new, or especially children, when I was teaching children's classes, I would make them tell me that whatever they were looking at, what letter of the alphabet do they see? And is that a good letter to keep the viewer's eye in the painting? I know that sounds trite, but that's a really good way to look at your painting and ask yourself, what letter do you see? And does that letter keep you in the painting? Or adjust to keep the viewer's eye in the painting?
I like that analogy of using the letters of the alphabet and what letters not to use in the alphabet. And I love composition, and I see so much composition in your work, even the body language of the people, how the people are turned in or once turned away, and even how you have great sense of proportion, like when you put a child on a person's shoulders that they're carrying them. And how do you know how to make the clothing to look right?
A lot of drawing, just constantly drawing. And I mean, I'll go down to Balboa Park and just sit there and draw people. And I love the different outfits. There's the other place that I did a lot of my figures was at an airport. There's two places people wear crazy outfits, and that's the beach and the airport. And so a lot of the paintings that I did of people on the beach, I actually sketched. I mean, I did over 2 million miles on Delta in my lifetime. So a lot of sitting in an airport, and there's just models standing and waiting. And I just sketched them constantly. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And one of the other questions that are on the minds of people is it's all about the Facebook and getting the likes and getting the fans. But you're from a generation that you had to put in some hard work. You had to enter maybe some competitions. What was that moment that looked like for you that put Linda Dahl in the lights and when Linda Dahl came into the scene?
It's funny. I didn't like the name Dahl. I thought it was too cute for a serious artist. And so I was trying to figure out, should I go back to my maiden name? What do I want to do? And I went to New York City and I went to an AWS show, which I had gotten in. And I had met oh, I can't remember who it was now, a very famous artist that I just so admired. And Barbara Nitris introduced me to her. And she said, oh, Linda Dahl, I know you. You do those figures in sunlight on the beach. And I said, how do you know me? And she said, oh, with a name like Dahl, who could forget it? And I thought, I'm staying Linda Dahl. And that was when I realized that my figures on the beach, that people were recognizing them. They were knowing they were mine. From across the room, you knew the painting was mine. The one at the Watercolor Society, people talk about all the time, and happens to be my husband and a good friend. I love that painting, and I think they have one of my best ones. But there's nobody that looks at it and doesn't, even across the room, you know that's my painting. And I realized at that AWS meeting show, when I met all these people I had never met before, and they all knew me from catalogs where my paintings had been in different shows all over the country. And that was the day I realized that I really did have a unique style, and that people do recognize it.
You know, you just said it right there in 2 words. You are recognized for your unique style. And you took it even a little further by that painting that's most recognizable is your husband and his friend. So someone that you knew really well, right? And I think a really good painter knows their subject.
Well, some of the ones I sent you my neighbor. She had done me a lot of favors, and when I was sick, she had taken me to the doctors, to the hospital. She'd brought me chicken soup, and so as a favor, there's one where the guy has a hat on and they're on the beach, and that's what I did. It's a Fushi painting, and I did that as a gift for them, for her always being there for me. So I do, one of the demos that's on YouTube is my grandson and his wife and their daughter. Another one is another granddaughter. So yeah, when I used to put my paintings up in the living room on an easel, and my husband would walk in, if he would look at it and he'd say, oh, that's Robin, I'd say, yeah. And if he'd say, who's that? I don't recognize it. I'd say, oh, I don't know, a stranger, even if it were Robin. Because if you don't get that body language, it'll never be that person. You can't tell somebody who it is. They have to know who it is. And it's, like I said, a block away. I can tell who my friends are by their body language. And that's what I love to study.
So good. And I'm pretty sure if someone is still watching this YouTube recording right now, they're probably more advanced and they're really engaged with what you're saying. And for someone that's been a president of a watercolor society, you've seen a lot of entries, and entries now you have to send in photographs. I remember when entries were like slides. Talk about trying to photograph for slides. But how would you tell someone to photograph their art well?
For me, now everybody's work is different. Mine is a lot of light, subtle color, and it's got a luminous feel to it. So the way I photograph is to take it outside, to put the painting in the sun, to put me in the shade. Half the time they're already framed. And I think I talked to you about this once before. And then if I'm in the shade totally, and I use my iPhone, I get the best color and the best representation of the painting. I've tried every kind of indoor lighting. I just don't do well with indoor lighting. But around noon, in the morning there's yellow light, in the afternoon the sun is red light. So it has to be close to about noon. I have a fence that I can lean it against, and I can be against the house, which puts me in shade and yet puts the painting in the sun. That's how I get the best and everything. Or the many times and at AWS, we had to actually ship the entire painting to New York to be juried. you want to talk about expense and hardship. Yeah. So the slides, I think that's the best. I think every once in a while there's a surprise, but I think most jurors are pretty good at being able to see color cast and being able to see manipulation. And I think we're pretty savvy. I haven't seen a juror yet who was terribly surprised by the painting when it arrived. Even if it has a color cast, we can almost visualize it. We know what color cast is, and we know when someone's picked some up.
And it's kind of like a badge of honor to get to show with other amazing artists in a show such as AWS and NWS, you know, and even the San Diego Watercolor Society for their IOE show, you know, and so those people really take their job serious. And I've gotten the opportunity, as when I was director, to watch you juror show. And it was so wonderful to see just the time that it took for a juror to really already know their craft and to look at the quality of work being presented. And I thank you for doing that. You jumped in there at the last minute because we had one gal who couldn't come because she got COVID. And
I love to jury. I don't mind at all, but I really like the workers who are there when I'm jurying to hear what I'm saying. And as I had said, you know, I don't want it repeated outside the room, but I think it helps them a lot to hear what's going on in the juror's head and to know that, oh my God, it was just 10% of the painting. It was just this one little corner that was so disturbing. The rest of the piece might have been an award piece. And I think that's surprising for new painters to realize that their piece might have been rejected, but it really might have been just maybe 10% of the painting that was rejected, not the whole thing. I mean, as I'm looking right now, that red is so bright. If somebody had that red out here on the end, and there was nothing else with that red, that might make a difference, you know. So I'm always looking at value. I'm looking at color. I'm looking at design. I'm looking at the composition. I'm looking at the intent. Then I'm looking at craftsmanship as well. So there's a combination of things I think most jurors are looking for.
Well, Linda, it has been such an honor to have you. Thank you so much for taking time. I really appreciate you. And I'm going to put down here in the description how people can get a hold of you. But how would you like people to get a hold of you if they wanted to reach out?
My email's fine. It's my webpage. And if they forget the email, which is lindadoll@me.com, if they forget it, they can go to the webpage and the email is there. YouTube, I have about 30 videos on Procreate for the artist and how to start to use it if you want to start to use Procreate. I have several demonstrations.
I'll put a link to that down in the description on the Procreate, and I'm also going to put that wonderful demo that you did for Daniel Smith during the pandemic, where you actually gave us a little studio tour of that wonderful studio behind you.
And then the other one I did for Daniel Smith is my grandson and his wife, I believe.
Oh, yes, that was great.
Okay, well, it was so fortunate to have so many good teachers who shared their knowledge with me that really all I'm doing is trying to share it back and play it forward. So thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. Isn't that just like so many nuggets with our good friend Linda Doll? So I hope that you'll actually rewatch this one because we talked so much about staining colors, figurative work, and wow, so much meat in this interview. So thank you so much for joining me with another interview with pro watercolor artists. I'll see you next Monday with our next interview. Take care and keep them brushes wet. All right, bye.